Back in 2020, something really strange started happening off the coast of South America. It wasn't an invasion, not in the way you might think. No shots were fired, there were no warships, and yet nobody in the region had the power to stop it. This is the story of an invisible navy, and it might just change how you think about global power.
So our story really kicks off right at the edge of the Galapagos Marine Reserve, one of the most unique and precious ecosystems on the entire planet. And in 2020, this enormous fleet just materialized, seemingly out of thin air. It ended up sparking this huge international incident, all without firing a single shot.
If you were looking at satellite maps from space, it was incredible. It looked like a whole city had been built on the water overnight. Just this dense cluster of lights and ships hovering right on the border of this natural treasure. So what was it? Now, when you hear massive fleet, your mind probably jumps to destroyers, maybe an aircraft carrier battle group, but this was something totally different. It was absolutely a projection of power, just not the kind we're used to seeing. Get this, the massive fleet parked right at the edge of the Galapagos was made up entirely of fishing vessels. But we are not talking about your average little fishing boats here. No, this was fishing on a scale that is hard to even comprehend, truly industrial. 340 of them. Let that sink in for a second. A massive armada, lined up in this almost disciplined formation, right on the border of Ecuador's protected waters. And here's the most important detail. Almost every single one of them was Chinese. This wasn't a coincidence. This was a coordinated effort. And here's the really wild part. Those 340 ships, that's just the tip of the iceberg, a tiny fraction of the total force. You see, China runs the largest distant water fishing fleet on Earth, estimated at over 16,000 vessels. To put that in perspective, no other country is even in the same league. The scale is just staggering. So you have to wonder, how is that even possible? Well, it's because these aren't just boats. They're basically floating factories. They're built for endurance. They can catch, process, freeze, and package everything right there at sea. They can even refuel each other, which means the fleet can stay out there for months and months without ever having to go home. And this gets us to the heart of the whole conflict. How can a fleet this big just operate wherever it wants? Well, the answer is all about exploiting legal gray areas. It's a strategy that is, technically, perfectly legal, but the consequences are absolutely devastating.
Here's how they pulled it off. The entire fleet of 340 ships parked itself just outside the invisible line that marks Ecuador's exclusive economic zone. So technically, they weren't breaking any laws. But here's the thing. Fish don't respect imaginary lines on a map. They migrate. And this massive wall of ships was waiting right on that line to scoop up everything that crossed over.
Of course, Ecuador protested. They were outraged. But China's official response was simple and, well, technically correct. They just said, we are within international law. And this perfectly shows us what a new kind of battlefield looks like. It's not about war, it's about using the rules as a weapon to get exactly what you want.
And listen, this Galapagos situation wasn't a one-time thing. This has been building for years. Argentina, for example, has had to get tough, even sinking Chinese ships caught fishing illegally in its waters. But when you're up against a fleet of thousands, sinking one or two ships, well, that just becomes the cost of doing business. So that raises a big question. How is this even financially possible? I mean, how can you send thousands of ships to the other side of the planet and keep them there for months? The answer reveals this huge imbalance of power that's all about economics. It all boils down to state subsidies. The Chinese government pumps billions of dollars a year into its fishing industry. That money covers fuel, it helps build the ships, it covers insurance, it makes the whole thing profitable. Now consider this. Ecuador's entire yearly budget for its navy is less than $1 billion. How can a country like that ever hope to patrol its waters against a state-backed fleet of this size? It's just a complete and total mismatch. And this is all part of a very clear national strategy. First, you've got to feed 1.4 billion people. Second, you have to lock down long-term sources of protein, especially since China's own coastal waters have been badly overfished, and that is what is driving this huge strategic push into the waters off Africa, across the Pacific, and now more and more around South America. But there's another layer to all this, a dimension that people don't talk about as much, but it might be the most important part. Because this fleet's mission, it goes way beyond just catching fish. You have to think about it. When you have a constant presence at sea, you're gathering enormous amounts of intelligence. These ships are in the perfect position to map the ocean floor, to monitor commercial shipping lanes, to watch the naval movements of other countries. They might not carry missiles, but they give you presence. And in geopolitics, persistent presence is a powerful form of influence.
There's this idea that really captures the modern reality of power. It's that the 21st century doesn't always send destroyers first. Sometimes it sends trawlers. And that's it, right? Why send an expensive, provocative warship when a fleet of seemingly innocent fishing boats can achieve a lot of the same strategic goals, quietly and without starting an international crisis?
So what went down at the Galapagos in 2020, that wasn't just a random event. It was a preview. It was a clear signal of a whole new era of global competition.
The key thing to take away from all this is that 21st century power isn't always loud and explosive. A lot of times, it operates quietly. It asserts itself through money, through logistics, and through sheer endurance. It's about being able to outlast and overwhelm your competitors, often without ever firing a single shot. So when you look out at that vast, open ocean, it might look empty. But the truth is, it's quickly becoming one of the most crowded, most contested geopolitical spaces on the planet. And South America is finding itself right in the center of this new quiet struggle.
Which leaves us with a pretty critical question for the future. When you're faced with this kind of overwhelming economic and logistical force, what do? Should the countries of the region band together to create a united front? Or is this just the new reality of how global power works now? The answer is going to define the next chapter of conflict on the high seas.